Holy mother of God. I feel like I committed a cardinal sin for having put this game off for so long. I played the demo back in '09, but unfortunately never got around to playing the full game. I'm so happy to have finally gotten around to playing Bioshock because this game deserves every bit of love that it gets. Gameplay still holds up all these years later with plenty of depth to explore mechanically and just a ton of fun to be had in general. The game strikes a great balance between simple, arcadey combat and a variety of RPG-like mechanics, making it an easy game to casually pick up and play, but also having enough there to toy around with for players looking to play it multiple times over. And the writing... oh, the writing... Rapture really does live up to all the hype that I've been hearing all these years, and I would easily consider it among the best written worlds of honestly any piece of media that I have ever consumed. Everything felt so perfectly realized, from the rise and fall of Andrew Ryan to the relationship between the Big Daddies and Little Sisters to the fantastic ensemble of supporting characters such as Steinman and Sanders Cohen, all the way down to the very citizens themselves. Rapture is utterly phenomenal, and the brilliant environmental storytelling blends perfectly with the outstanding level design to create a world that I am very eager to revisit when I finally finish this godforsaken backlog. And oh my god, the would you kindly twist, just... utterly spectacular. And I feel like I could listen to the audio logs delving into the world and characters for hours straight. In no small part thanks to the spectacular voice work. Seriously, the voice actor for Andrew Ryan, I don't know what this guy was doing at the time of this game being made, but this dude cracked voice acting. It's just so good. Everything about this game holds up so insanely well that I can barely believe it was made so many years ago. Even graphically and technically, like, I know this is a remaster, but the game looks really good. The environmental and artistic design is spectacular, and the graphics, I mean, yeah, it's Unreal, or at least it kind of looks like Unreal Engine. I should probably double check that. Here's a note on screen if I'm wrong. All of it looks so good. Bioshock is utterly incredible. 9 out of 10, I am definitely going for the Platinum Trophy. I have fought the urge to come back to this game multiple times over since playing it. Again, only because I need to finish this godforsaken backlog. I suppose if I had one criticism, and it's one that really kind of everyone has, it would be the final boss. I don't even think the final boss is necessarily bad. I mean, it's pretty simple and pretty easy, but it's not badly designed or anything. It just sticks out as really video gamey and almost cartoony compared to the rest of the story. And I'm not using video gamey in a bad way necessarily. I'm just saying that there's a bit of a juxtaposition from the presentation of this boss to everything else in the story feeling relatively grounded, you know what I mean? But then this Dr. Manhattan dude comes in and I don't know what happened. But hey, unlike Elden Ring, Bioshock can get away with having a pretty mid final boss because Bioshock is just that good. Jesus, these games rule! This has to be one of the best video game sequels that I have ever played. It felt like the developers knew exactly what to polish, what to spend more time on, and what to keep consistent between this and the first game. There's a bit of streamlining here and there to the mechanics, but not in a way that feels as if it's going out of its way to simplify what the first game had established. Instead of forcing the player to pull up their gun in plasmid hands all the time, both are simply made accessible at all times so as to ensure the player doesn't spend valuable time fumbling between attack modes. The hacking minigame has been made into a sort of QTE, however now it happens in real time, meaning the player can't just stop the action in hopes of gaining a massive advantage. But there's also a chance that they could enhance or get more from the device that they're hacking, meaning that increased risk can have a massive payoff if handled properly. The gameplay really does feel like Bioshock 1, but made better, similarly to Dead Space 2 versus the original Dead Space. They knew exactly what to improve on, and they knew what to keep consistent, and that's worth a lot of praise. Rapture is still an amazing setting with level design and environmental storytelling that are utterly breathtaking, and the characters in this game knocked it clean out of the park. Big Delta, Eleanor, Sophia, and Sinclair were all stellar, and although this game didn't have a big clever twist to rival the first game's "a man listens, a slave obeys" scene, the emotional impact was far more resonant in Bioshock 2 thanks to the psychological angle they took with the relationships between Delta, Eleanor, and Sophia. I won't pretend that it moved me to tears or anything, but the characterization is honestly superb, and while I personally found Fontaine and Ryan more compelling, Sophia Lamb is a terrific antagonist, and I enjoyed the exploration into how a mastermind can foster a cult-like following. Minerva's Den is also a fantastic piece of DLC. I don't have too much to say on it because it is somewhat disconnected from the base game and even Bioshock 1, but it tells a really good, self-contained story in its own right, with an ending that was surprisingly emotional and overall very well earned. Seriously, this is by far the emotional peak of Bioshock storytelling. Also, the laser gun was really dope. I love lasers. So, hey, it was pretty cool. Gameplay-wise, it really was just more Bioshock 2, but I'm not complaining about that at all. Just like the first game, Bioshock 2 is an outstanding 9 out of 10. Out-freaking-standing. You bet that I'm going for this platinum trophy. And as for my man Big Daddy Delta, I salute you, my king. Now if I could just figure out what the heck happened when they were writing the next game. Bioshock Infinite is one of the most boring shooters that I have ever played and one of the most laughably dumb and yet relentlessly pretentious stories that I have ever seen. I was really going into this one hoping that I was wrong and just didn't get it when I was younger and played it for the first time, but no, it really is just that bad. Gameplay is so far removed from the original duology in almost every way that matters. Instead of having a weapon wheel with every weapon that you've picked up readily available, Infinite decided to follow the trends of shooters at the time and limit the player to 2 weapons at a time, immediately hindering player expression, and not to mention the role that each gun could have played mechanically. The skyhook was kind of cool, I guess, and Elizabeth was useful at times, but aside from that the game doesn't do much to build on the foundation of the prior 2 games. If anything, it actually detracts from them. We got some new powers, but at the expense of many of the classics, so that's something, I guess. I really only bothered to use 3 of the powers throughout the game though, because they were so ridiculously powerful on their own. Seriously, Possession is just completely busted. It also doesn't help that enemies are so boring and generic when compared to those of the original games. Gone are the days of splicers and their many variants, the iconic Big Daddies, the Alpha series, robotic drones, boss fights, and even the security alarm systems, which made for some interesting gameplay scenarios. Instead, we get Colombian white supremacist policemen, the handyman, which feels like a poor man's Big Daddy, some fire dudes that explode, and some robot dudes that explode. There is one part with some Siren Head looking dude that could have been interesting, except all it does is spawn in weak enemies that you can kill in less than a second. At least with a single well-placed power. We don't even get to fight Songbird, which the game goes out of its way to make out as the big bad nemesis of Bioshock Infinite. Everything just feels so dumbed down. Less exploration, excessive streamlining of core systems, less weapons, simplified enemies, simplified weapons. Nothing really feels as if it's there to push the series forward so much as help it fit into the mold of shooters at the time. And that's not a good thing. Look, I get it. That was one hell of an era for Call of Duty. I could go on forever about how much I love the first Black Ops, and Lord knows enough people loved Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops 2, but Bioshock was never going to be Black Ops. It was never going to be Modern Warfare 2. Infinite has some cool set pieces, but that's hardly a substitute for good gameplay and a solid narrative. And don't even get me started on the god-awful writing of this game. This game's complete lack of understanding for how a multiverse is supposed to work rivals the fourth phase of the MCU in terms of sheer stupidity. From the moment that Booker and Elizabeth cross over into another universe, the narrative completely ceases to make any sense whatsoever, and it blows me away at just how badly written the last 15 minutes of this game are. Not only that, but the world building of Columbia is utterly horrendous and painfully belligerent with its social commentary. What made Rapture so interesting was how we slowly uncovered what went wrong despite seeing it in ruins and understanding the premise from the get-go. There was a mystique that belied the ruins and questions that the player wanted to see answered that kept them engaged from beginning to end. Meanwhile, in Bioshock Infinite, it takes all of 7 seconds in Columbia to see how unrelentingly over-the-top racist the society is, and it beats you over the head with it non-stop all the way up until the script drops it completely in favor of a multiverse-spanning quest to find out just what the heck is even happening anymore. It takes so little time for the very setting of this Bioshock game to lose any and all mystique that even the game itself stops caring. Not only that, but the city itself doesn't even make sense. Between the thin, freezing air, much more direct exposure to sunlight, and the effects of severe weather, Columbia should be completely uninhabitable, and every second spent aboard it is another second that shouldn't even be possible to experience as leisurely as its inhabitants seem to. Well, Loveless, you're forgetting that the city runs on quantum— Alright, let me stop you right there. Quantum has become the sci-fi equivalent to magic, and saying, well, quantum did it, is just as uninteresting a cop-out as saying, well, hey, it's magic. Sure, Rapture used the fictional super element trope to explain plasmids, but that was only a single cog in an otherwise massive machine with many moving parts. Bioshock Infinite just says, yeah, this impossible city, it was made possible through quantum, and it doesn't bother to give any more thought to it. Why do I even bother? Then there's Burial at Sea, which they made episodic because that's what was trending at the time, and Bioshock can no longer afford to be the one setting standards of its own. I've seen a lot of praise thrown the way of this DLC, and to put it as kindly as possible, I think that praise is severely misplaced. I'll admit that it was cool seeing and playing in Rapture again, but that wave of nostalgia wore off the moment that I remembered I was playing Bioshock Infinite and noticed that none of the environmental details lined up with those of the first 2 games. Seriously. Different architecture, different plasmids, even Sandra Cohen's art is different, no longer following the objectivism that Andrew Ryan so deeply fetishized. There's even the skyhook and the corresponding rails, which don't even make sense in this environment. What is this garbage? Like, what is happening here? Episode 1 is divided into 2 halves, the first half being a walkie-talkie bit with minimal gameplay, while the second half is basically Bioshock Infinite, but with limited resources. Yeah, because that's what this game needed. Though I will credit Burial at Sea for one thing, and that's the return of the weapon wheel, which allows us to carry all of our weapons at once. Why wasn't this just implemented into the base game with this DLC? Heck if I know. At least make it an option, just do something to make this game a little bit better, please. You also fight a Big Daddy whose AI somehow appears worse than that of Infinite's regular enemies, which, I gotta say, weren't very impressive either. Then the ending happens, and it turns out the whole episode was pointless because it was just Elizabeth killing another Comstock because apparently she feels the same pain that every other Elizabeth who dies across the multiverse feels thanks to Comstock. Reminder, this is across infinite realities and she is somehow still alive and sound of mind? You mean to tell me that she is seriously experiencing fatal pain across infinite realities at all times, and yet she is still this level-headed? Yeah, okay game. Apparently she was convinced that this is the last and final Comstock, which we know he's not because this game revolves around an infinite worlds concept. Even if I granted you the complete and total horse crap about the constants and variables, there are now an infinite number of Comstocks who saw Elizabeth beheaded and asked the Lutece twins for a place to escape to. So yeah, Elizabeth's whole motivation is saved for a dumb twist, but doesn't even check out after about 1 second of putting even a bit of thought into the very premise of this game. What a crock. We even see Booker in another world, once again in episode 2 of the DLC, which— oh my god. Burial at Sea Episode 2 has to be one of the most insufferable pieces of content that I have ever played for any video game. Right up there with Virgil's downfall for the Devil May Cry reboot. Gameplay is a wannabe survival stealth adaptation of Bioshock's gameplay that doesn't work in the slightest. It's frustrating, cumbersome, boring, shallow, and I could not wait for it to be over. I guess the crossbow was cool to see again, and I appreciated actually being able to carry my freaking health packs again. Why is this not in the base game? Stormy, what are you meowing at? But that's about as much praise as I'm willing to throw the way of this DLC. Congrats, you implemented some very basic features that should have been in the game from the very beginning. And you brought back a cool weapon. Thumbs up, Bioshock Infinite. And the story? Oh my god. Bioshock Infinite never made any sense to begin with, that's just the nature of a multiverse at this point, but Burial at Sea Episode 2 tries so unbelievably hard to make the player take it seriously, and at a point I just start to pity it. This DLC really pulls out all the stops. We see Su Chong, Fontaine as Atlas, Andrew Ryan. They even reference good old Dr. Steinman. You better believe that they tried as hard as they could with the fan service here. We even get one last epic monologue from Andrew Ryan about how Atlas is just using Elizabeth. Ooh, dramatic irony, it's so cool. In a realm of infinite worlds, possibilities, and timelines, apparently the Elizabeth from Bioshock Infinite's world specifically just so happened to end up in the same world as the first Bioshock, which also happened to be home to another Comstock who decided to buzz off to Rapture of all places, instead of going on to build Columbia because in his timeline alone, he saw baby Elizabeth decapitated by a portal, and I thought the base game's jokes were bad. Oh, and can we talk about the fact that Fontaine needed to come up with an elaborate plan requiring a completely random person from another universe just so he could get the trigger phrase for Jack Ryan? You know, the trigger phrase that Fontaine commissioned in the first place? Not only is Fontaine a colossal moron, he's also apparently the luckiest man across the entire multiverse. But that's not even the end of his character assassination, because he is also an easily frustrated buffoon who can be completely dissected by just taunting him once or twice. How on earth was this written by the same guy who directed the first game? At this point, I'm more convinced that the Ken we got to write Bioshock Infinite was himself from another universe, because the writing of this game and its DLC almost seem dead set on contradicting the prior two entries at every conceivable level. But above all else, Bioshock Infinite really wants Booker and Elizabeth to matter more than they do, despite the fact that in the end, these games already existed without them, and due to the nature of infinite worlds which Bioshock Infinite chose to introduce to begin with, there are infinite more Raptures that exist across the multiverse without Booker or Elizabeth. Infinite more Atlas impersonators go on to track down Jack Ryan and ask him, "Would you kindly?" Infinite more Andrew Ryans never even so much as heard of a babe named Elizabeth. Quick interjection here. I just gotta say that the design for Elizabeth in Burial at Sea, oh my god. Oh my god. But anyways, Bioshock Infinite wants its protagonists to play such pivotal roles in the shaping of the universe that this series inhabits, yet simultaneously completely undermines their role in shaping the events of these games through the very nature of that which was supposed to make them matter to begin with. It's crap. I've seen a lot of love given to Elizabeth, and aside from that Burial at Sea design, again, 11 out of 10. I cannot for the life of me understand why fans of this game hold her in such high regard. I honestly think that Elizabeth couldn't be less interesting if they tried. Despite being kept in what's essentially a chamber for the great majority of her multi-decade life, Elizabeth is a cutesy, bubbly go-getter who inexplicably has the power to traverse universes. She is quite literally a Disney princess, but with the power to jump across universes. You might as well put her in Kingdom Hearts at this point. It's implied that the Lutece twins would have something to do with her having this power, but their role in this story is kept so obnoxiously vague that I can't be bothered to look into them. Seriously, the Lutece twins feel like Borderlands characters, but if they were written for a pretentious art house film. I mean, god, would you two kindly shut up? Anyways, yeah, the fact that Elizabeth's personality doesn't at all line up with her upbringing just confuses me to no end. And I'm not exactly sure how it is that I'm supposed to take a character like that seriously when there's not a single reason given for the very thing that makes her who she is. And don't get me wrong, I think Courtney Draper did a great job. Her performance as Elizabeth is really good, but the writing just makes Elizabeth impossible to buy for me as a legitimate character like I would Andrew Ryan, Sophia Lamb, Grace Holloway, or Charles Milton Porter. I apologize to all the Elizabeth fans out there, but I'm not going to give this mediocre wannabe Disney princess more praise than she deserves. I mean, for the entirety of the base game, we hear her and Booker go on and on and on about getting her away from Columbia and going to Paris, and yet she can open portals to Paris within the chamber that she's supposedly being held captive all of her life. So, why doesn't she just open a portal to Paris, walk through the portal, and you know, Stay there. Also, for God's sakes, why don't voxophones have subtitles? 2 out of 10, this game blows. I'm excited to eventually return to the first 2 games to try and score their platinum trophies, but I cannot say the same for Bioshock Infinite, which I am happy to never play again. There's a constant for you.